Greetings and welcome to Matrix Revealed Presentation 29. I've been giving some thought to a lot of things, partly in response to the comments and also to videos I've been looking at and listening to. Where do we start with this one? Mandela Effect, something I've not really touched on before, and I can't help but notice how this seems to be quite a high profile topic, shall we say. But I'm going to suggest that's nothing new. For example, the saying about the Word of God would, to me, imply that it is absolute and cannot be changed, and yet you have the likes of the Bible, which you then find out is not just a singular book, but there are many versions. The King James, for example, the Good News, the New International Standard, and so on. There's something like, I don't know, 65, maybe more versions, and some will have additional books, some will have books removed. So, with the changing of the words within those versions, has a Mandela effect just on that. So, on that basis, I would say that it is real. What its purpose is beyond causing division and confusion, because you will get people who are adamant that they saw a particular thing and that's what they remember. Another person may remember something different, and you start thinking, well, this is within my own lifetime. I don't really know. I feel uncertain in what I now think with regard to my memory. You can add to this as well the things about the nanotechnology and what can be passed through the eye of a needle in a vaccine, these nanoparticles that are supposed to latch on, that, shall we say, mesh in, and it's all about meshing on every level with this. And I've been thinking also about how you can get a very hostile reaction from people because they operate within these narrow bookends. Now, there's a very good official narrative that is a perfect illustration of this. I remember this from school days, talking about the Greek civilizations, the Minoans, and I forget the names, but the Athenians or whatever, and almost like tribal cities, civilizations fairly in a very small area, and they were fine fighting when they're fighting against similar civilizations using similar tactics, similar weapons, and pretty much an even odds that way. But then when you were faced with a new army with a new tactic, then their weaponry and their tactics can become pretty useless because it's something new to them, it's outside their bookends. And it's like if you were to say, right, let's settle this with a game of sports, and you bring on a cricket team, and the opposing side brings on American football or rugby players who are going to play a very different game, and possibly even when the referee is not looking, they may actually play dirty and circumvent some of the rules that are in place and not play by those rules as well. Now, this is, by extension, you take this where you are introducing new ideas to people or trying to introduce not so much new ideas, but looking at things from a different perspective. Often their bookends are such that the reaction to a lot of these things they're presented with is, oh, they wouldn't do that. Well, no, they wouldn't do that if they have the same mindset and are working in the same parameters that the person who is in denial is saying they wouldn't do that to. And this is half the trouble. I've already started this survey, and it's a very simple 3 yes or no answer questions, because the questions are as important as the answers. Now, when asking these questions, it's very interesting to see the facial expressions. Now, these are the 3 questions I've been asking. Do you know about the fires in Australia? Just a simple yes or no to that. Followed up by a secondary question of, do you know about the fires in California? And then the killer question, and this is the one to really watch the answer to. And maybe I've only managed to ask 8 people so far because there wasn't many people about, but I'm looking to do a survey of 100 people, so I can talk in percentages. And I think it's a very good exercise, but I'm going to suggest maybe 1 or 2 more of you could do this as well. The third, the killer question, is to then ask them after those first 2 questions about the fires, are they aware of them in Australia? Are they aware of them in California? Is to then say, do you think this is a natural event? And that's very interesting, that the reaction on their faces before they even say yes or no, or maybe, is another one that seems to be coming out. And I'm not going to spoil it with, I've only got 8 responses so far, and I want 100 before I actually fully talk about this. But the pattern that already is emerging from those 8 is quite interesting from that way. It then leads on from that to start looking what else and by what method. And I'm going to mention again the Black Sheep Researcher channel, Maps the Greatest Lie. Because the one question people ask is, why would they do that? Well, watch that video, because it goes beyond the maps and then talks about frequencies, the great vowel shift. Now let's give you an example of this. You've got the Tower of Babel, or Babel. Now Babel can become a cable. From this root word as well, you can have a Kabbalah, and then also out of this you can get a cubula, a cube. This is only by not only changing the vowels, but changing the sound of the vowels. I'm sure when I've said Kabbalah, when I've said cube, when I've said Cabal and Babel or Babel, you've already got created pictures in your mind from things you've been told or things you've looked into yourself, and you form a picture just from that. And that is mostly just by changing the A to an A in the sound of the letter A. So you can see how a spell in sound already conjures up a different picture depending on what you actually hear. You'll notice one of the greatest distinctions between all the other European languages and English, counting in the United Kingdom as part of Europe, as it were. Notice how there are no umlauts or accents over the vowels that you find so frequently in French and in German in particular, that will aid you in how to pronounce certain letters. And again, I question as to why it is so lacking in English. It's said that, and I can't speak of this from personal experience because English is my first language. But if it was my secondary or third language, it is said that English initially is one of the hardest languages to learn to speak, and yet it probably is the most predominantly used language in the world. And within the UK, again, very different from the rest of Europe, whereas particularly in the Netherlands and Germany and Scandinavia, young children are encouraged to learn languages from the age of 4 when they first start school. Within the UK, we don't start learning languages either, normally just French, German, or Spanish, and you don't even get a choice in that. You are put in a class and you will learn this language whether you want to or not. You might actually have wanted to learn one of the other ones, but they don't allow for this in this system, which I don't think is a good thing. You should have that freedom of choice, and something you feel more drawn to, you should be given that chance to learn that language as opposed to the one that is imposed upon you. But it's very interesting how within the UK is also this mindset of wherever, particularly people who go on holidays to Spain, regard the Spanish as the foreigners when they are the guests there. But it's also reinforcing this concept and these artificial boundaries that we know as nations. And the Lord, the N, is at ion. It's giving you a false narrative and bookends to be constrained within. So I can't help. I was watching Rudy Marley Askett's channel where he shows a wonderful contact between this tribal group and the outside world they've never had before, and this initial touch is like an electric shock. And I can't help but thinking, if we were in an isolated tribe, would our senses be operating in a slightly different way, that even if we don't visually detect something, we can definitely sense something, and that is why they were getting the electrical shock? It may well be down to the processed foods. I mean, I don't know one way or the other, but this film crew, who I have to agree with Rudy, went in with all the wrong reasons to make a name for themselves with the film rather than being of any benefit or from a place of benevolence with this isolated tribe who viewed these outsiders with suspicion and were very wary of them, and rightly so, because what they were being offered to smoke and give one a knife, which creates a problem because now one has something the others haven't got, is completely wrong. It would be better to keep away from them and leave them to be, and not have the interaction, I think, in this case, because what are we introducing to them is we're from a very corrupt, very imperfect situation, and this is so clear to see in what we're told are Western civilized worlds, where you have homeless and food banks. That on its own just shows that. Now, we do seem to be, it's described as being like a game and very much like a Masonic black and white checkerboard floor. But ironically, it is not as black and white with the players involved. This is one of the other problems, is people's idea of what an actor or an actress is. They seem to forget there are actors and actresses who are in a singular role for their entire acting career. You all know them as politicians, as mainstream professors, scientists, priests, and so on, and they just play a singular role. They don't swap. They're not on a short film, they're on a long, lifelong film, and that is what it is, a film or a veil. I showed you on presentation, what are we on now, 29, on 27, the book and the overlay that's on this, and something I sort of missed, and I made a sort of humorous version of it with a photograph. You remember I showed you these, well, there's two bulls, a Bible, there's a Bible. Well, what about a tribal? I mean, tribal is a 3, and it's meaning something very different. But something else I wanted to touch on with, you've got this sound frequency, you have the spells, everything is showing beyond what the 5 senses are detecting. Now, this change in frequency, now I'm offering something of a prediction here, and this seems to be the way it's unfolding anyway. Those that are on this spiritual awakening and truth-seeking path have done sufficient inner work to be open-minded enough to, instead of wrapping new ideas around things you have been told, to go back to the drawing board and start again. And that seems to unlock so much more. A whole new awareness starts to come in. The synchronized numbers, the synchronized thoughts, and so on are indicative of this. Now, with the increase in the frequency change that we are creating, because this is our huge advantage, we have the power of creation, we have imagination. We don't have to replicate, we can come up with new ideas, new creations. We could discuss this and talk of it in terms of it's a higher consciousness, a collective consciousness, and they aren't actually our own individual ideas, but I like the idea of being that we are aspects of a higher consciousness, and we're acting out roles in this reality to express this in many ways. It's down to every individual to where their bookends are as to what they want to accept as real. And from my perspective, anybody who is not prepared to just push those bookends way out there and allow any ideas as a possibility, at least to weigh them up rather than just throw them out because it doesn't fit with what they already know, they are doing themselves a disservice first before anybody else. Unfortunately, they then go on to project out from that. See, nobody wants to feel a fool. Anybody who's had depression or anxiety can relate to this. I think that it feels like it's only happening to you. So when you're presented with something, even a lot of people, I think, even if they can see the logic and where this starts to lead with any topic that is new to them, that is outside the official narrative, it's a huge shock, and nobody wants to feel like they've been fooled. And it sets up that same this point of singularity mindset that it's only happened to you, but it hasn't. And it takes that inner work to just be honest with yourself, to say, yeah, I've been fooled. I fell for this. I believed what I was told in school was correct, and I couldn't see any reason why it would lie. The time frames fitted nicely, like UAP channel as talked about on one I watched earlier today. And yeah, but then things, when you start looking across, and then it comes from the questioning of the official narrative, and it's like, well, hold on a minute, this doesn't tally with this information, and then you're met with a hostile reaction for even asking the questions to point these things out. But it is right to point these things out. and I have to agree with Matt on the shiny gurus. Are we just going? I mean, he puts this brilliant. Are we just going to look at the positives in the one that has been repeatedly attacking us when we were a child? I don't need to go any further into paint pictures of gory details. I think you can get the idea just from that. But is that all you're going to see? The good side and the positives, and not even acknowledge what is happening to you from the bad side, because there is a world of difference, a total difference in reality in having an acknowledgement of something, but then giving power to it, and actually giving it energy. See what else is becoming apparent um, with this frequency change. Look at the visual as well. Now, these church machines are sound, they are light, they are probably sending out electromagnetic, because remember that the dark side will always twist truth and give you half truth. So they're still giving you the electric, which they're making you pay for, but they've taken away the benevolent magnetic, the Magdalene, the magic, the true magic, and replaced it with tricks. So you're still getting the electrics, but you're not getting the magnetic. So from this, you think every time you look up at one of these old, we call them Tatarian structures, like a town hall, where there was probably a circular portal that is giving out a magnetic energy. You've now got a clock face, so you're looking up at time, and we are subjects of time in this reality. Now, a lot of people probably won't have liked this, but it was a brilliant analogy that Christine on Holographic Multiverse gave. It's probably the most simple explanation of this. In the beginning there was nothing, then you've got the figure of eight, which is the source, the serpent, the spirit, that then splits into the nature, the O, and the I, which you can make the L and the cross and everything out of, and that's where a lot of people are fixed. They're stuck in that. And the SOI, the operating system on the phone, the SOL you can get from that, the S10, the Satan. It's like, oh, you've mentioned Satan as being the creator. Look, there is a huge difference between a Satan and a satanic. And it is a satanic control system. I see Satan. But remember, the dark side are very good at flipping labels over. So they give you four characters. We call them Churchill, Roosevelt, Stalin, and we call them Hitler. It's when you realise that they are four aspects of the same side, playing the good cop, bad cop routine on everybody, the divide and conquer again. This is where the illusory AI world comes in. It comes down from that I. It's the I, you've got the I and the O. Is that not what the computer system works on? The 0 and the 1, the binary, the binaries. But again, it's the spelling again. The Aries is a rise. And you've only got to also look at the human body. Now, Satan, Saturn, Kronos, Old Father Time, same characters. You also get Satan, Santa Claus, the Claustrum that sends the gifts down. So there's no getting away from this. I mean, there's a lot of people will talk about Satan and then say Luciferian, and it's a very blurred line. And remember, there is always a duality in all these things anyway. There is a black and white chess pieces, but it's very much more multicoloured. Think also like the Wizard of Oz. You've got the dream world where Dorothy goes into after she bangs her head, and it's a technicolor dream. Her world is black and white in a conscious state, but now it's a technicolor dream. It's shown in many colours, and it's a very different world with lots of illusions and things. I'm going to hold back on talking. I have mentioned about this film and a lot of the allegorical aspects to it, but I'm going to be working with another channel, and I don't want to do a spoiler alert and take too much away from that, because that's going to be an amazing experience. Partly for selfish reasons, because the Freak Sense TV channel, Charlie and Colleen are such wonderful people, and I see in them myself, and they see me, and they see themselves in me, and that's the level of awakening I'd love you all to get to. I've said before, I'd like to see someone coming from the spiritual side and the truth seeking side working together, because the two things go hand in hand. Spiritual is truth, and that's what we're searching for. Truth seeking has to include the spiritual to be the truth as well. We are way beyond just simple flesh and blood, born, live, retire, die, and that's it. It is far more than that. Now, in an ideal, veil-free, benevolent reality in this realm, I think I'd be quite happy. I'd like to see an entire year, and by year I do mean the accepted 365 days through all four seasons. But maybe I want to stay on and see a second or a third year, and I'm sort of paying in advance for this anyway. And as many of you are, just by giving up your time to listen to what I'm saying, and I do appreciate that, and all the lovely